For us woodworkers, purchasing a piece of equipment for our shop is kind of psychological. On the one hand, we might want a piece of equipment. On the other hand, we might need a piece of equipment. And sometimes we just want a piece of equipment, so we figure out reasons that we need that piece of equipment. Sometimes we get a piece of equipment we think we're going to use a lot, and we wind up not using it very much. And then there's those great times when we buy a piece of equipment we're not sure we're going to use that much, and we wind up using it all the time. Well, that's what happened to me when I got my first drum sander. It became an indispensable part of my shop. I used it all the time. Well, now I have upgraded to my dream machine. So let's take a look today at the SuperMax 1938 drum sander that I got from Highland Woodworking. For our walk around tour, we'll start right here at the business end of the sander. And the first thing that you'll notice is that the conveyor bed is actually wider than the head. And this is super. I'll tell you about that in just a second. As the name implies, the unit will sand 19 inches wide in one pass, and it'll do 38 inches by turning your material end for end and going through in a second pass. And that's great capacity for the unit. Now, the reason I like the wider conveyor bed is that when you're doing big pieces like that, it offers this additional support out here to the side, and I've found that to be extremely helpful. Another thing that you'll notice here just at the initial look at the machine is metal, no plastic. And this hood assembly that goes over the sanding drum is quite large, which allows a lot of air movement around the drum. So your dust collection is extremely efficient. The company recommends 600 feet per minute of air, and I have got at least that on my unit, so I get absolutely no dust coming out of the unit when it's running. The other important thing about the size of this enclosure is that I think that additional airflow around the drum really helps to cool it. And keeping your drum cool on any type of drum sander is very important because it makes your sandpaper last longer. Okay, I'm going to remove my dust collection hose now so that we can get a little clearer view of the inside of this. First thing you'll notice is a nice metal mechanical button to release the hood from the top. And if you've had another drum sander, a competing drum sander, one of the things you'll also appreciate about the size is the ability to wrap the sandpaper. I've got kind of large hands, and it's difficult in a different drum sander to get in here and replace the belt. This one is really quite easy. It works out really good. And as you can see, again, all metal, heavy metal components. Really nice. This is looking at the machine now from the operator position as you're feeding in material. You'll notice on the right-hand side is the control panel for the IntelliSand system for the conveyor. You turn on the conveyor using this dial, and this adjusts the speed of the conveyor from pretty doggone fast down to pretty doggone slow. This switch here controls the sanding drum. And as you can see and hear, the machine is very quiet. Actually, your dust collector will make more noise than this machine. Now, it does make a little bit more sound when it's actually sanding a piece of material, but this is a really quiet machine. Now, I want to draw your attention to the two motors. The main motor for the sanding drum is 1 3/4 horsepower. That's a 1/4 horsepower stronger than other competing machines in this class, size class range, and that's really important. And I don't have actual specs on this motor as compared to the motors in other machines, but my experience so far has shown me that this motor is stronger than the machine that I had before. What would happen before sometimes is my conveyor would bog down if I was taking a little too heavy a cut. Sometimes the drum would even slow down. I have not had either of those situations occur in my testing of the SuperMax, so I'm very, very happy about that. Now, the motor itself plugs into the IntelliSand control box, and then there is one plug to the wall. It's a standard 110, 120 volt AC plug, but you will need a 20 amp circuit for this machine. There is a depth scale here on the side. The scale that comes attached to the machine is an inch scale, and they provide a metric scale that you can replace this with. There is also a digital readout that can be mounted right here, and you can order that as an option from Highland. So let's continue to move around the machine and look at some more of the features. This big induction motor spins the 5-inch diameter sanding drum at 1740 RPM. Now, what I wanted to bring your attention to over here is the height adjusting mechanism. One of the things that really bothers me about all types of equipment that use a screw thread or Acme thread type adjustment is when there's slop. You've got to turn the handle a quarter or half a turn to get the threads to engage, and then when you want to go the other direction, it's another quarter or half a turn to get the threads to engage, and it makes it real iffy as to your adjustment. Now, this might be kind of hard to see, but if you'll notice when I turn this, boom, 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 the thread is turning exactly with the handle. That thread is threaded into this big cast iron piece here, so your movements are sure and absolute. Really critical when making fine adjustments on a drum sander. And speaking of cast iron, this entire frame assembly, the base of the sander itself, all cast iron. Heavy as heck, which is great. You want heavy equipment in your shop. It cuts down on vibration. It's rigid. It won't get out of alignment. So that's a fantastic feature of this machine. Let's keep moving around. All right, we're moving around now to the outfeed side of the sander. A couple things here. This adjustment, there's one on both sides. There's a little wrench that hangs down here. Slide this up until you engage this nut, and you can adjust the tracking and the tension on the conveyor belt. It's very common on most drum sanders, and this one is really well executed. I like the way they did that. Now, here's what's really interesting is this lever. This lever is in the upright position, and that's the position you'll use most of the time when you're sanding material that's 19 inches wide or less. But when you get ready to sand something wider and you need to make 2 passes, you simply lower this down, and that raises this side of the conveyor bed by 3/1000ths of an inch. And what that does is that prevents the ridge that often occurs on competing drum sanders when you do material in 2 passes. On my old drum sander, there was no way to get rid of that ridge. You just had to sand it out by hand or plane it out after you were done with the drum sander. With this simple arrangement, you can lower this down, make your 2-pass sanding operation, and you won't have that ridge in the middle. This is great. Okay, we've moved around from the outfeed side to the other end of the drum sander, arguably from the operator position. You could call this the left-hand side of the machine. 2 things I wanted to show you. I don't really need to say much. All you got to do is look at the size of that bearing right there, and if that doesn't give you confidence, I don't know what else will. More importantly, even than that, is the adjustment mechanism for adjusting the conveyor bed to perfect parallel with the sanding drum. Now, I should hasten to mention that I checked this thing frontwards and backwards, and straight from the factory, this was dead on perfect. But you still want to check it every once in a while, and you may need to adjust it every once in a while, and there is no easier machine than this one. 4 button head, hex head bolts. Loosen those just a little bit, and there's 1 spring-loaded nut here. Turn that nut and it will raise and lower this end of the conveyor bed, and you can get into perfect alignment. Little small tweak, get it perfect, tighten these 4 bolts back up, and you're done. There simply is no machine on the market that easy to adjust. Just brilliant. All right, let's take a look at the machine in use, and I'll show you some of the additional features. I've got a piece of maple here. It's a little rough on the surface, and there are some inconsistencies in the surface. This came straight out of the planer. It's great because as much as I've adjusted my planer, I still have a very small amount of snipe on the ends. It's only a couple of thousandths, but it's still there. And if you just leave your boards a few thousandths over and then run through the drum sander, it'll make them perfectly flat, the snipe will go away, and you'll have perfect boards to work with. You also don't have to worry about grain direction because it's sanding, it's not cutting. So a drum sander doesn't really care much about the grain direction, and even real curly, complicated grain patterns, not a problem at all. So let's sand this board. Now you can see that the sound level is not real loud at all. It's actually quite comfortable to work with without hearing protection. And the sanded surface is beautiful. Now, with any drum sander, you will get longitudinal scratch pattern running the length of the board. You take that out with a random orbit sander after you're done with this, and it's real easy to get out because the scratch pattern is relatively small. The other nice thing about having a wide drum is that you can run your boards through at an angle, and that will minimize that scratch pattern on subsequent passes. Adjusting the sanding depth, of course, is done with this handle. 1 full rotation is a 1/16 of an inch. So if I'm taking off material off the surface and it's a pretty wide board, I'll usually adjust this about 1/4 of a turn. You don't want to try to take off too much material at one time. Interestingly, there's no dust at all, nothing coming out of the machine. It's all going up through the dust collection hose. Excellent dust collection on this unit. There we go. Well, this board is flat and very smooth. Like I said, all this will need is a touch-up with a random orbit sander, and it's ready to use. Well, that was a pretty good test. I got a really nice finish here, and that was with the 80 grit sandpaper that is pre-installed on the SuperMax Drum Sander when you get it. But for a lot of reasons, you will want occasionally to change grits. For example, I might want to go up to 120 and get an even smoother surface here before I start with the random orbit sander. You know, sometimes with a random orbit sander, no matter how good you are or how hard you try, you can get some little dipsy doodles in the surface, and you might want this to be perfectly flat. Or you might want to change to a coarser grit sandpaper. Maybe you need to remove a little bit of material, or you just have some rougher stock that you're working with. Well, either way, it is super easy on a SuperMax Drum Sander to change out the sandpaper. And I'm going to show you by demonstrating a change from this 80 grit paper to 120. Now, I've set up a camera here and some lights so you can get a bird's eye view of the drum compartment and the changing procedure. I'm going to have to kind of work around this a little bit, but I'll do my best to show you how it's done. Let's get going. The first thing that you want to do is go over here to the take-up side. This is where the tension is provided on the sandpaper, and just press up with your finger and release the end of it. And then all you have to do is roll your paper out. And I like to just roll mine up as I go along. That way it's not flopping around all over the place. And when I get to this end, again, just reach in here, push up on the little spring catch, and out it comes. Now I've got a roll of sandpaper here. I can put a rubber band around that and save it for the next time I need to use it. Now this is a brand new roll. It comes wrapped pretty tight, so it's a little springy, but it's going to be okay. The one thing you want to make certain of is your direction of travel. You'll note there are arrows on here, and those arrows need to be placed so that the sandpaper is traveling in the correct direction. Now this is a cloth-based paper, and the direction of travel is important for the longevity of the paper. And you'll notice the arrows are pointing this way. So what we want to do is we want to stick this in, lift up our little catch here, put the paper in, and give it a little tug and make sure it's caught. And then we want to, and you want to make sure it's straight. And I didn't get it straight. There we go. Now what you want to do is you want to wrap it so that this pre-cut edge is right on the edge of the drum and lined up straight. Now it comes past the pre-cut point, and you will start to get your taper. And what you want to do is just keep those real close, but not overlapping. You don't want these edges to overlap, because that would cause a ripple or a problem in your sanding. So you can just wind this around. Keeping it as tight as you can and keeping it lined up. And if there's a tiny little gap, not to worry, because since this is running at an angle, that little gap will never create a problem. Better to have a little gap than to have an overlap. And it's really nice to have all this extra room inside here. When I work with coarse sandpapers, I sometimes wear a pair of gloves when doing this. All right, now we're at the end, and what we need to do is we need to lift up this spring and drop this end through until it catches, and the spring will pull this tight and hold it in place. And there's no tool necessary to do this like on other drum sanders. All you need, there's plenty of room, just get your finger in there and pull it. And I think I've got it in. Let's just make sure I've got it as far as I can get it. You want to get it as far as you can, because your paper will expand a little bit as it warms up and you're using it, and that will continue to pull it tight during use. And that's it. That's all there is to changing the paper on a SuperMax Drum Sander. Just using one of these little eraser sticks here to clean up the belt on the drum sander. It's a good idea to do that periodically when you're sanding, because the speed of the drum and the sandpaper can build up pitch and resin on your paper, and this will definitely extend the life. I got a good tip from the fine folks at SuperMax. If you're using their pre-cut abrasives, they are actually cloth backed. So if you get some really bad pitch or resin buildup or even a burn mark on your sandpaper, you can actually take that paper and soak it in mineral spirits for a while, and a lot of that stuff will be easier to clean off. Just be sure and let it dry before you reinstall it on the drum. And speaking of installing stuff on the drum, one of the things that I think you need to know is that because of all this additional space in here, it is really easy to get your hands in here. You don't need a tool or anything to compress the clip and get the sandpaper attached. Real easy to change over. Well, let's do a little recap on this machine. I'm actually sitting on the open stand that comes standard with the SuperMax 1938 Drum Sander. And this stand is super durable and pretty easy to put together. If you're interested, I have another sort of companion video to this which shows the unboxing and the assembly of the entire unit. So if you're interested in purchasing one of these drum sanders, that'll give you a lot of helpful hints as well. Now, there's an option on the open stand to get wheels, and I would definitely recommend that you get those. Now, of course, we discussed before the sander will sand 19 inches wide in one pass, up to 38 inches in 2 passes, and because of this handy dandy lever on the back, which raises this side of the conveyor system by 3/1000ths of an inch, you'll never have to worry about getting that awful seam or ridge down the middle when you do a 2-pass operation. Really great. The conveyor system itself uses the IntelliSand system, which adjusts the speed of the conveyor to compensate for high spots it might hit or rough spots that the drum might hit as it's sanding a piece, and helps to keep you from burning wood. It's a great system. The unit itself is this frame, the motor mount frame, and the bottom frame of this is all cast iron. And that's important for several reasons. First of all, just the weight of this system is tremendous. In fact, the head only on this system weighs more than competing drum sanders' total assembly. Weight's important. It helps cut down on vibration and it offers rigidity. And speaking of rigidity, this big cast iron frame around here that flares out at the bottom and gets even wider, attached to a cast iron plate and the whole assembly attached to that, means that this will never sag or tilt. It's going to stay perfectly aligned from now on. So the only adjustment to get perfect alignment parallel between the conveyor and the drum is by adjusting the conveyor, and I showed you how easy that was to do. Super system. Now the sander itself will sand material as thin as 1/32 of an inch and as thick as 4 inches. You can sand a piece as short in length as 2¼ inches or as long as you want to go. The unit itself, the fit and finish is really good. All of the hole locations matched up perfectly in the assembly. The paint job is great. Everything is steel. There's really no plastic on the machine. This is built extremely well. This is more like an industrial machine that you can afford to buy for your shop. It's really great. I don't know what else to say about it except that I love it. It was a fantastic upgrade for me, and I hope if you get one for your shop, you like it as much as I do. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.